All right, everyone, welcome to session 9. This is the final night at Intro to Coding Live. We've got the last few challenges to go through here. We'll go through them as a group and we'll try and work through these as a group. So these ones will be a little bit harder than the challenges that we had tackled previously in class. So I'm going to share my screen and try and advise and keep things moving, but I do want some input from the class while we work through these last 3 challenges here. And we're going to start with the prime number challenge. So if you want to fork that, you can follow along, but we've got prime number, so we're going to be using loops on this one. And there's a couple of different ways to solve this. The first way that we're going to solve it, we're just going to brute force it, so that we don't have like some astronomically large numbers that we're working with to see if they're prime numbers or not. So we're just going to brute force it, and then we'll see if we can kind of clean things up from there. All right, so let's go ahead, take a look at the README here. Well, all right, so prime number is a positive integer with no divisors besides itself and 1. It cannot be divided without a remainder by any number besides itself and 1. Write a function to check whether a given positive integer greater than 1 is prime or not. All right, so we're going to get one param, which is a positive integer. And we're going to check it to see if it is prime. And we're going to return a Boolean, excuse me. So true if it is prime, false if it is not. All right, so we'll say see below for an example. All right, so first things first, as always, check our param. So what are, if we're going to check to see if this is prime, what is the most basic way we can do this? Anyone want to take a stab at that? And this isn't as much of a coding question as just a basic math question. So yes, we'll use the modulo, right? So we're going to check for a remainder, but what numbers do we need to check to see that this number can or can't be divided by? Well, so 1 in itself, so if it can only be divided by 1 in itself, then it is prime, right? But so let's say, just as an example, the first number we're going to do is the number 15. How do we check how many numbers do we need to divide this by to see if it's prime? Yep, so we're going to need a for loop, and we're going to yeah, we can check between 1 and 9. If we're just going to do like a simple brute force, basically it's between every number between 1 and itself, right? And we know that prime, or so basically, like if we were just to write like the most simple brute force, right? Like we would start at 2, we'd divide the number by 2. We'd start at 15, we'd divide the number by, or I'm sorry, we'd then divide the number by 3, we'd divide the number by 4, by 5, by 6, by 7, all the way up to basically 14, right? Like that is the most inefficient like way to do it. But that is like the most simple brute force way to do it. And so if the and I'm trying to think here. And we wouldn't want to just do 1 through 9. Because I'm trying to think, like, the first one that pops into my head is well, actually, so that would be what is 17 times 3 is what is that? That's 34 for like 51, right? And I don't think 51 is evenly divisible by anything 1 through 9. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think it is, but it is evenly divisible by 17. And so to make sure that we're getting all of them, we need to basically just brute force every number out there. And so we'll start with just that basic brute force, and then we'll look at ways that we can clean up what we've got going on and make it more efficient. Maybe we'll throw some bigger numbers in there to like try and stress the replet out and see if it takes a long time and if we can get it done even quicker than that. So we want to divide our number by everything between 2 and 1 less than the number, right? So 15 would be 2 through 14. 9 would be 2 through 8, and so on. All right, and so that'll be our very first pass. So, and I saw in the chat somebody had, excuse me, thrown out the module or the remainder operator, right? So let's go ahead and start there. So let's do console.log and our num. Right, so there's 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. Right, so we've got all of these. We've got some of these are strings, some of them are actual numbers. So if we just do modulo 2 here on each of these, right, we see that everything automatically gets converted to a number. Now, if I wanted to check to make sure that I wasn't getting weird characters, like somebody actually put in an alpha character like A or B or C or something like that, we could always run like a parse in first and punch out if we needed to. Maybe we'll look at doing something protective like that a little bit later, but let's start here. So this is what I'm looking for one time. How can I do this multiple times? All right, I see Jose threw for loop out there. So if we were to write a for loop, where would I want to start counting in this for loop?
At 2, because every number is divisible by 1.
Yep. So we'd want to start counting at 2, right? And so when do I want to stop counting?
When it's equal to, less than or equal to the number. Because it's inclusive.
Well, remember, if we're trying to see if we ever get an equal remainder and we do less than or equal, so if my number is 15, that means I'm going to keep counting to 15, and I'll get 15 divided by 15. And
So it's just
so,
less than,
yeah, so I want to stop one before, so just less than my number. Right? And do I want to count by ones? Do I want to count by twos? Am I incrementing, decrementing here?
incrementing, by one, because you want to hit every, potential number.
Yeah. Now, what I'm doing num, modulo, or remainder, and then what am I dividing it by?
I,
Yep. So let's take a look and see what this looks like now. All right, and for the time being, I'm just going to comment these other ones out, and I'm going to throw, we'll throw the number 15 in here. Right, and so the first time through, right, so we're counting as num is divided by I by 2. And I see a 1 over here. So what is going on? Let's do this. We'll do console.log num I and then that. And let's get rid of, I'm sorry. Let's do this. Okay, so we've got 15. I is 2. So num, sorry, now that's why the numbers are throwing me off. So remainder I, so the remainder is 1. Right, so 15 divided by 2 goes in at 7 times, there's a remainder of 1. Right, so as far as we know, 15 is still prime. Now, the next time through, right, we have a the num is 3. 15 divided by 3, the remainder is 0. So we know right here that the this number is not prime, right? And so there's a couple of different ways. And so the least efficient way to do this would be to say, we'll say let is or result equal, and we won't do anything. And we'll say if and I don't really need an else statement here. And then or actually, I will need an else statement for right now. Right, so this is saying that prime is true. This is saying it's false. It's saying it's true. Basically that because it's not evenly divisible by it, there's a remainder, right? And I'm switching back and forth with this. So all this is going to do is give me the last result. And so how can I clean this up a little bit? Right, I don't necessarily want to switch this every single time, right? So what could I do to maybe make this stop the very first time that I know it's not a prime number, right? There's no reason for me to circle through this 15 times if I know right here that it's false. So how could I accomplish that?
Could you do a break statement?
So I could do a break statement, but even past that, like what I could do is I could just get rid of result altogether, right? And so here, the first time that, because it only has to be divisible by one other number, right? So like 9 is not a prime number because it's also divisible by 3. I don't care if it's divisible by any other numbers, especially large numbers, right? Like, so if I take 27, 27 is evenly divisible by 9, but it's also evenly divisible by 3. So I don't need to know that it's evenly divisible by 9. I can stop the very first time I run into it, right? And so the very first time I run into it, where this becomes true, I can return false because I know it is not a prime number, right? And then I can get rid of this else statement. And what would happen next is, instead, like if I make it through the entire loop without it ever hitting false and returning out, then down here, I know that it wasn't divisible by anything else, and I can return true, right? And so is prime 15 should return false, and it does, right? And now with 2 is prime, because we're starting with I being 2, right? So like if I do something like this, right? So num is 2, I is equal to 2, while I is less than num, right? So this is already not true, right? Because they're going to be equal to each other. We're not even going to do the for loop, and we're just going to return true, right? And same thing for 3 here, right? So I is 2, 2 is less than 3, 3 modulo 2, so, right? Like we should see that this is prime as well, right? We get true. So where we run into issues is, like, let's look at um, um, how do we, is there a last page here? Let's export this. All right, so let's take a look at this. So 48,527. So we'll see what that does to our brute force algorithm here. Actually, I didn't even take that one. Let's see. Can we get anything bigger? right? So like this one is taking quite a bit longer. Don't know how long it's gonna take. Maybe I shot too high here. Let's take a couple of zeros off. Let's grab this one. Basically just looking for one that doesn't hit it instantly. Okay, so we hit it a decent amount of time on that one. So let's take a look at this one. All right, so that one's pretty good. So let's take a look here at. See if this will work and wrap it. No, time no be fine. Console log, console.time. No. Mm, um, it may not be doing it to the replit console. So console.time. There we go. So basically about 10 milliseconds or a tenth of a millisecond, sorry. So let's add a zero. Let's grab this guy. Four. Oh, the timer's not lining up with it, so. Which is fine, so, but basically, and the hard part is that. With the replit, there's something going on with the programming with it. Like, once the program is done executing, it should stop and it should actually give me how long it took to run over here. But for whatever reason, like replit is not stopping when it's supposed to. All right, so, but we know when we run this one, like this takes a little while. So there's a couple of different things that we can do here to try and speed this up, right? So like we got a true out of this eventually. So the first thing is any even number besides 2 prime? No, right? Because every even number is divisible by 2. Right, so we know in the first loop here, right? So we can get rid of it if we know that it's divisible by 2. And so that's one way. The other thing is that right now we're brute forcing, we're dividing it every single time. There is a trick for finding prime numbers, right? Which becomes much more useful. Yeah, math is hard. When you start dealing with like these larger prime numbers, right? And so find whether a large number is prime or not, add all of the digits in the number. If the sum is divisible by 3, it is not prime, right? So except for 2 and 3, all other prime numbers can be expressed in the general form of as 6n plus 1 or 6n minus 1. Right, so like there's a couple of different ways that we can do this here. So uh, method 1, right? So we could say the formula for prime number 6n plus 1 is that, and then let's see here, where is right? So we can add all of the digits together. And so we could do something where we take this and we break it apart into individuals. So we could do something like this. So we could say, let R of num equal num dot split. Or I'm sorry, num dot to string dot split, and split on every character. And then that here real quick, and we'll say console.log our num, right? So that's every single character in there, and we know that these zeros, so we've got 1, 5, 6, 9, 12. And so if that's evenly divisible by 3, and that's what this thing was saying over here. So it is not a prime number. So if the sum is divisible by 3, it is not a prime number, which seems weird because we know that's a prime number. And am I doing the math wrong? 1, 5, 6, 8, 11. Yes, I was doing the math wrong. So this is not evenly divisible by 3, so it would be a prime number. So we're still on the right track, right? And so with this now, we could do something like this. So I could say, let sum of digits equal 0. And now we could do for let I equal 0, I less than R of num dot length I plus plus. And then we could do sum of digits plus equal R of num I. All right, and then at the end here, we'll console.log sum of digits. R of num is not defined. And boom. got typo. Sorry, this is because I still left it as a string. So parse int. All right, so we've got 11. And then we could then do modulo 3. Right, and so with that, we know that if we go back to like the truthy and falsy, right, we know that 0 is falsy, any other number is going to be truthy, right? So we could do something like this, and basically if there's a remainder that it is a prime number, if it's evenly divisible by 3, it'll be not a prime number, so we can do true, false out of this. Right, so that's a prime number. If I were to do 15, that those digits add up to 6, evenly divisible by 3, right? We get false, so that's working. And when we do that, and then we can take this out of the console.log. Right, and we run this. See how quick that is happening compared to when we were doing it this way, right? And I think if we went up another couple of zeros, right, we were getting to a point where I think it ran for more than a minute and we weren't getting an answer yet. And if we throw that down in here, right, like that is a huge prime number, right? So where are we at here with this? Right, so million, billion, so we're like up at 100 billion, right? And so the old way that we were doing it when it was that prime number that high is we were doing 100, almost basically we were doing 2 less calculations than this. We were doing 100 billion 4,915 when we were brute forcing it. And with this, it's done like that, right? Like we're not running through and dividing it by each of those numbers. And this is, again, and Andrew said it, like math is hard, right? Like, and you don't run into it a ton in web development, but you will run into it with algorithm challenges quite a bit, like also including in interviews, right? Is sometimes they give you something that's very hard unless you find the trick to it, right? Like unless you find what makes the algorithm efficient. And most live technical interviews are not like, I wouldn't give you this and expect you to know the trick to find prime numbers and say like, we're going to share this screen in the REPL and that's all we're going to do. I'm going to tell you like, you can use all of your tools. You can Google, you can talk to me about it. The only thing you can't do is like phone your friend and ask them what the answer is, right? And so what I'm watching for is that you can go out and you can Google answers to make things better, right? While you're working to solve these, because maybe we come in and I say, hey, write that prime algorithm or prime number algorithm, and I give you these 4 test cases and you get it working. And now I say, okay, it is 100 billion 4,917 a prime number, right? And now we'll sit here and watch this algorithm spin until we run out of time, or we go out and we try and find a better solution for it, right? And then past this, like if I were to keep going with this, like you could probably get rid of the for loop and just add in a I can comment this out here real quick. We do R num. And we can do dot reduce C A plus C, and we'll give it a value of 0. And this may give me the strings again. Let's see here. Yeah, so there's the string. So I would just say parse int a parse int C. Not sure if this will work inside the reduce or not. We'll find out here real quick. It does. All right, so we get 22. 22 is not evenly divisible by 3. And so beyond this, got that. So let's clean this up a little bit. That, and that. And then I would also get rid of this. We won't get rid of it, we'll just comment it out. And then I would take this and get rid of this and just say return that modulo 3. I'm sorry, I believe it's no, that's a true false. No, yeah, because if there's any remainder there, I don't need it to triple equal 0, right? So, and then this would be like the way I would actually solve it if I ran into something like this in the wild, right? And so we went and again, iterative solutions, making things slightly better, all of those things, right? So we went through this step by step. We started here, right? This isn't great, but we were getting a solution. And then once we made it harder on ourselves, we had to do this. And then eventually we could clean that up into something that looks like this. Right. Any questions on any of the way that I solved this? Okay, so it's 6:46. Let's go ahead and take a 9-minute break and we'll kick back off at 6:55 p.m. Central Time, and we'll get into the next challenge. All right, so next one we're gonna hop on is number of characters. So it is 6:56 p.m. Welcome back from the break. We're gonna go ahead and fork this one. I will probably set up a breakout room for this one and give everyone a little bit of time to try and work on it. And then we'll come back and do it together. And then lastly, we'll do employee data, which builds on what you learn in number of characters and then pretty much utilizes everything else that we've done in class up to this point as well. So let's go ahead and fork the number of characters. And let's take a look at the README on this one. So we'll just grab this whole thing here. Turn anything, yeah, so we get that undefined. Okay, So with this, we're getting one param, which is a string of characters. And we're going to return, it looks like I see the curly braces down here and some key value pairs. So we're going to return an object. All right. So the object is going to contain a set of key value pairs where the key is the character and the value is the number of times that it appeared in the string. So as always, check my param, right, with that first console.log, and then we'll start building out a solution from there. So Jose said, I don't see any code on the screen. So can you see my screen or no? You cannot see my screen because I paused the share. I apologize. How about now? Better?
Yeah, I can now. Thank you.
Nope, good save, because I was totally screwing that up. All right. So again, write a function that takes in a string of lowercase characters and returns an object containing the count of each letter in the string. Right. And so we're getting in a string that looks like this, and we want to return an object that looks like this. Right. So B appears one time, D and D appears twice, A, 1, 2, 3, C, one time. Right. So we're going to console.log our param, our string coming in to make sure it is what we think it is. And then we're going to need to look at each individual character in the string, right? So all right, so we're going to need to make a decision. So we're either going to want to create a new key value pair, i.e., for example, A is 1, or we'll need to increment an existing key value pair. So A with a value, key of A with a value of 2. So I need to make a decision. I can do this using conditional logic. The first time I run across the character, make the key value pair and set the value to 1. Each time after that, access the key value pair via the key, and we do that with this format, right? So object key, and increment the value by 1. Once I've iterated through the entire string, I can return my object. And not necessary to complete the challenge, but as a bonus, if you can return these in alphabetical order, more power to it. So let me grab this and we'll drop this into the chat. Of course, it's going to tell me the message is too long. How about that? And that. And also grab this. That in the Slack. All right, so I will give us about 35 minutes to work on this one. Maybe 40 minutes. I'll check in on the group. If you finish it before then, feel free to return back. Again, same rules apply. Have one person share their screen, work on it together. If you've already solved it, please don't share the answer, but feel free to help the group towards the answer. Any questions for me before I push us into the breakout room? Okay, here we go. All right, everyone, welcome back from the number of characters challenge. So nice job on the solution as a group in that one. So we'll go ahead and go over that now. So we're just going to follow along with the pseudocode, right? So we're going to do console.log str, which is shorthand for string. And there's my string. Now, I saw in the group, right, that we can do a split. And we can iterate this, or we can basically split it into individual characters. The other thing we can do, because strings do have a index position, right? And they also have a length. We don't necessarily need to split it into a string because we're not changing any of the characters. We just need to take a look at each one. So we could do for let I equal 0, I less than string dot length, and then I plus plus, and we can then come down in here and we can grab string I. Right, and there's all of my individual letters. So in this one, we don't necessarily need to split it. However, if we're looking to, well, and we'll start with this and we'll keep going with this for right now. Excuse me. And we're going to need an object to hold all of our key value pairs here. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So we're looking at each individual character. We know we're going to need an object. So let's say, we'll just say let results equal an empty object. And there's nothing in there, but we know that we're going to return our object at the end. So we'll just return results here. And now instead of returning undefined, we've got an empty object. Now, the next thing I need to do is figure out how I'm going to get my string, my individual character in as a key, and then add the count as a value. Now, I have two things that I'm gonna have to decide here. So I'm gonna need some conditional logic. And I'm going to have to address the first time I run into a letter. And I need to add the key value pair of the letter with the number 1. And then every other time I run into that letter, I'm going to need to make the decision to access my object via the existing key and then increment the count by +1. All right, so first things first, let's just get the key added in to the object here with a value. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this console.log, get rid of that. We know we're going to use this, and we're going to say results equals 1. And so now we'll just go ahead and loop through there. I've got B, D, A, and C. Those are all the letters that I have in there. So I mean, I can add some more if I want to. You can even do spaces. You could throw some numbers in here. You do some special characters. It's going to pick up everything as a character. Right? So we've got all of those. And let's go back to the way we were before here real quick. Oops. There we go. All right. So that's what I'm looking for. Now, if I wanted to put these in alphabetical order, so the bonus points down here, then I would need to split the string. So if I were to do something like this, so I could just say string dot split on every character, and I'm going to console.log this here real quick, and we'll do it step by step. So console.log string.split. Right, so there's that. And then I could do dot sort. And I'm not going to feed in a callback function on that, but this is, will sort for you. So now we see these as A, B, C, D. So it's going to plug them in the order that we see it. And then we can just do dot join on every character. Right, and so now the letters are in order, and I'll take this out of the console.log, and I'll just do string equals this, and I'll do reassignment in place. And so now when we see that, I went from BDAC to ABCD. All right, if we throw in some special characters and some numbers, I don't know if it'll catch all of them. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know how it will treat those, right? So it puts the numbers first, then the special characters, then that, which is fine. But to get them in alphabetical order, we just need to sort it before we start to build our object out. All right, so now I've got everything here, A, B, C, D, 1, 1, 1, 1. So this is my case for the first time I ever run into this. So let's look at starting our conditional logic here. So we can say if results dot has own property, and this has own property, right, determines whether an object has a property with a specified name. The return value is a Boolean. So this is going to return true or false here. All right. And so we can say we're looking for the key, which is going to be string I. And if it has that property already, this will return true. We'll enter our if statement. If it does not have that property, that's false, we enter our else. And so we've already solved our else case here. So we can just plug that in right there. And now we need to solve for what happens when this is true, which is what happens when this key already exists, how do we increment it, right? And so the same thing is we need to access the key, right? So str bracket I, and we just need to increment, right? And so plus equals 1, The longhand is this. But then we can also just do this, right? And we'll run it. 3 A's, 1 B, 1 C, and 2 D's. So, and the other way that we can do this, right? So if I take this and comment this out here real quick, the other way to do it would be the keyword in. Right, we get the same thing. So this does the exact same thing as this. This is just a built-in, and this is a keyword. All right. Very similar to the solution you had in your room. Like, this is the way I would proceed with this. Does anyone have any questions on any of the steps that I took to solve this? Right? We made sure that the param was what we thought it was going to be. We figured out how to look at each individual character in the param. We solved for this. Then we solved for this. And then we solved for this. And then, like I said, we did the bonus points right here. This was not necessary, right? Like, even if I comment this out, I still get the correct answer. I just get them in the order that they first appeared in the string. And then I glued it all together and I return the results. That's the solution. So again, big problem. How do we break this down into smaller problems that we understand? And we solve one problem at a time, right? How do, like, I did this. Now, how do I do this part? How do I do this part? Like, I'm not trying to do it all at once. I solve one part. If I was writing real code, I would save it. I would push it up to a GitHub repository or my AWS code commit, and I would save it. And then I would start writing new code. And that way, if something goes wrong, I can always hit a button and go back to the previous version. All right. So it is 9:18 or 8:18 Central Time here. So we're going to get into the last one. I will lead the class through this one so that we get out of here on time tonight. So this last one is employee data. We're going to fork the replet. Let's take a look at the README over here. So, and this one is going to be the most similar one to what you're going to run into when you start to fill out the application at Code Platoon or any other coding bootcamp that had like a technical part to the application. Like, this would be one of the easy questions on the application. So you're a new programmer at your company. Your CFO needs some data regarding all the employees. Your CFO needs to know the number of employees per job type, the average salary for that job title within the company, the average bonus that job title receives within this company, and the average total compensation for that job title. You're given an array of objects that represents all of the employees in the company. You need to parse through all of the employee data and return an array of objects that represents each job title and the corresponding compensation data, including title, total employees, average salary, average bonus, and average total comp. All right, so let's go ahead, we'll grab this. All right, so here's our employee data here, and we've got array of employees. I am, just because we're going to be using array of employees a lot, I am going to change this just to employees to make it easier to read, because we're going to be accessing this quite a bit. All right, and so we're going to console.log get employee data, and then we're going to feed in employee data, which is the name of this array. So this is an array of objects, right? Square bracket means array, curly brackets means object, right? So I've got key value pairs in here. I've got a key of name, a key of title, a key of salary, a key of bonus. right? So, and then there's the value, string, string, number, number. All right, so my param, I'm getting an array of objects that contains name, title, salary, and bonus. Each object represents an employee. Okay, now I need to return a array of objects, right? So let me, sorry, over here in the README, grab this down here. This is basically what we need to return. All right, and pull this over. I'm just going to throw this in as a multi-line comment down here. And then I'm going to grab this and pull this up here. Return. So return is going to be an array of objects. Each object is going to represent a title. Right. So with these, the unique thing in here is the name of each person, right? So we've got Joe, Kelly, Joan, right? They can both be developers, they can both be product managers, they could technically both be getting paid the same. But the thing that sets them apart is that each object represents an employee at the company. When we're coming back and we're returning this info, each object is representing a position at the company, right? And so we've got developer, and we have 3 people that are developers, the average salary for that position, the average bonus for that position, the average total comp for that position, right? And then we've got a product manager and we've got a designer. So what that tells me is I don't need their name. I do need to capture their title, salary, and bonus, but basically we're anonymizing the data. The CFO doesn't care about the name of the people in that position. So we're just going to get rid of that. All right, and so let's see here. This is what we're going to return, and to make it completely accurate, it's going to be an array of objects, right? And that. So we'll have one for product manager and one for the other, I think it was designer. Developer, yeah, and design. All right, so example, we'll say C below. Now for the pseudocode. Same thing. Check our param. Always check your param first. Put it in that console.log, and then you can start manipulating the data one step at a time. So I am going to right, so I'm going to need to parse the information from each employee and hold it in a temporary data structure. Now, the data structure I'm going to use is going to be an object. So keys, so here on the left, can be are always going to be a string. So even if you make it a number, if you leave the quotes off at whatever, behind the scenes, JavaScript is going to go in and stringify it. Like it doesn't care what you put in there. Like it'll reject things if you don't, like if you put spaces without quotes and stuff like that. But if you just put the number 1 here, it's still going to stringify it into the string representation of number 1. Some participation here. We know that a value can be a string, it can be a number, it can be an integer, it can be a floating point number. Can a value be an array? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, it can, right? So I could technically create something here and say, example, right, as the key, and then the value can be an array, right? So this is valid. Can a value be an object? Yes or no? All right, so we've got a key of a string example 2, and the value to that key is an object. Is that allowed in JavaScript?
Yes.
Yes, it is, right? And so, excuse me. The value in a key value pair can pretty much be anything you want it to be. And so I am going to create a temporary data structure that is a object, and I'm going to need a key in there. And so what is the unique thing in each of these? Right, technically we have two employees. That's not unique. The average salaries, those could all be the same. The thing that is unique is this right here, right? So the title. So I'm going to create a key of the title, and I'm going to need a value. And the value is going to be in an array, all right? And I'm going to put, one element is going to be the salary, one element is going to be the bonus, and the third element is going to be the count of employees. Notice I'm not doing anything to capture the name here. The names are just going to go away as I parse the data. All right, and so this is going to be my temporary data structure. Now, this is the part that's very familiar to number of characters, right? As I iterate through my array, through these objects, and I'm looking at title, I am going to run into a key the very first time, and I'm going to need to create the initial values, and then I will run in, there is a possibility I will run into the key subsequent times. And I will need to, instead of creating the key inside of my object, I will need to increment the existing values, right? So the first time this happens, I create this. Each time after it, I increment with additional information, right? So I can come back over here and basically say this all over again. All right, so I'm just going to copy this, and we'll throw it right here. And so we're either going to want to create a new key value pair, right? So which will be, we'll just say dev, and then we'll say 100,000, 10,000, and then 1, or we're going to increment the existing, right? Which would be 2, and we'll just say 20,000 and 200,000, because we've got two devs that are getting paid the same. We're just adding that information, right? So we're going to need to make that decision, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did over here, right? We're going to check to see if our temporary data structure already has that key in place or not. If it does, then we'll increment. If it doesn't, we'll create the new one. Now, because we're creating the value as an array, it's going to look more complicated than this, but we're doing the exact same motion. We're making the same calculation, all right? And so each time I run across a title, make the KVP and set the values to their initial amounts. And each time after that, access the KVP via the key and increment the values, and we'll just say accordingly. All right, so this is the first part of solving this. So let's go ahead and code this up, and then we'll get to a breakpoint, and then we'll come back and we'll write some more pseudocode for the rest of the solution. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to create an empty object. We're just going to call it parsed data, right? So as I parse through everything, this is where I'm going to hold on to stuff. Well, console.log employees, right? And I get the whole thing. So, and I know that I need to iterate through this. So let's go ahead and write our for loop. We'll say for let I equal 0, I less than employees dot length I plus plus. All right, and so let's take our console.log up here and let's do employees I. Right, notice how this is the whole thing. So there's our array, and each object is an element in an array. No curly braces or no square brackets anymore. This is us console.logging each individual object. So if I want to console.log just the title that I'm looking at, what do I need to write here on line 86? What do I add here? Anyone want to take a stab at that? Right, I just need to add my key. And so now when I'm going in to the array and I'm iterating through the array, and so that's the count, right? This is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, so on. And then employee data 0, this is employee data 0. This is an object. To look at the value inside of an object, I need to give it the key. So if the first time through, I am looking at the first element, the 0 indexed element of the employees array, and I'm looking at which is an object, and then I'm looking at the title key, and it should give me the value. So I should just see developer, product manager, design, right? And so this becomes my key for the values that I'm going to do, right? And same thing here, if I do salary, right? There's the salaries, and if I do bonus, there's the bonuses. So if I back up here a little bit to title, so I can take this out of the console.log, and just like we did with the number of characters, when I put that equal sign there, this becomes my key, right? So the key, this is the key, and now I need to assign it a value. And my value is going to be an array, and it's basically going to look like this. And then my initial count. All right, and so if we run this again, and now instead of, let's see here, there is my for loop. So I'll just come down here and I'll console.log parsed data. Whoops, what did I do here? Because I did employees, I apologize. That should look like this. I never accessed my object. So now I've accessed my object, and that is the key. I apologize for that. There we go. So now I have a object with 3 key value pairs. Now I am basically, and you guys picked up on this when you were doing the number of characters before you solved for incrementing. You notice that you can only have one unique, your keys are unique inside an object. And so when you were just assigning the value to the index, you notice that basically you saw the last index position. And because all that happens when I do this is the first time it you have the key value pair, it creates it, and then each time after that you use the same key, you're just overwriting the data, right? So like 77,500, we can see that gets tracked back to Chris. He's the last designer, right? So we assigned it the value of 87,000, then we overwrote it with the value of 77,500. Excuse me. So now, just like number of characters, let's write our conditional statement, which is going to look like this. So we're going to say if parsed data dot has own property, and it's going to look like this. Then the true will be, we need to increment existing data, else create it for the first time. All right, so now how do we increment? It's the exact same thing as number of characters. There's just more, there's 3 values to increment instead of 1. So we need to come in here and we need to access parsed, and we'll do this. So we'll do console.log parsed data, right? And then employees I, and then title, right? So that is our key. So when we take a look at this, right, those are our values, right? We have an array. So when we give it the key, we get the whole value. So anyone want to take a stab at how I just access 125,000?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, how do I, so right now I'm console.logging parse data employees I title. So I'm basically looking at my object and giving it a key, and then it's giving me the value. How do I drill down into this part of the array? What do I need to write up here on line 86? I'm sorry, not on line 86, on line 88. How do we access an element in an array?
Wouldn't we have to type in that bonus?
Well, even without thinking about what you have to type in, how do we access elements inside of an array? Right, in objects, we use keys. Inside of a array, we use what?
Bracket notation.
Yep, we use bracket notation, and we use bracket notate. We access elements inside an array with their index value, right? 0, 1, and 2. So if I put 0 here, now I'm just getting the salaries.
Yes.
right? And I'm also a little confused here as to where this is coming. Oh, I'm sorry, it's because that's because it's looping through multiple times. No, don't worry about that. I have an errant console.log somewhere. I was just weird because I was seeing this one twice. Not a big deal though. Okay, so this is where we're at with that, right? And so now, instead of the console.log, we now need to increment, right? So plus equals, and we need to do it with, we're gonna go back down to here, right? So employee I salary. And let's take a look and see what happens to these, right? So now we've got 382,000, 202,000, 164,500. So now we're incrementing our salaries. So that's looking good to me. So I can grab this, right? And now index position 1 is bonus, right? And so index position is 1 is bonus, and we know that we want to increment by bonus. So we'll go ahead and run this again. Right, so now our bonuses are being incremented up as well. And then lastly is going to be our count, and that can just be plus plus, right? So that is in the 2 index position. Right, so now we've got 3 devs, 2 product managers, and 2 designers. So if we look down here, 3 devs, 2 product managers, 2 designers. All right, so parsed data is now complete. This holds all of the data that we need to go to our next step, which is to then take it out of that temporary holding position and create our new objects and push those objects into our array. So we'll just call this part 2. All right, so now that we have all the data we need in the temporary data structure, we need to start assembling our final results, right? And that needs to look like this up here, right? And so let's grab this here again. All right, so basically I'm going to create an array because I'm returning an array of objects. That's my final end goal here. Once I have my array, I'm then going to create some temporary objects that will and create key value pairs for each of the needed things in that object. Once I have done that, I can then push my object into my array and loop through to the next key value pair. Once all objects have been added to the array, return the array. All right, so as always, I'm going to come down here and we're going to say let results equal an empty array. And I know now that my final return is going to be results. All right, and so let me clean that up. Let me do this as well. This makes that a little bit more beautiful. All right, so when I run this, right, that's it. I've just got an empty array for results. So I need to create a loop. So for this one, I need to loop through each of the key value pairs in my my parse data. And so I always get these confused. I think it's for key in parsed data. We'll find out here real quick. It's either of or in. And so we'll just console.log key, and either we'll get an error or we'll see my keys. There's my keys. Cool. So we're in our for in loop. All right. And so if I just do the key, right? So notice my keys are right here, right? So this is my object. My key is developer, product manager, and designer. If I just give it the key and I console.log the key, I just see the keys. If I want to see the values, I have to do this. Now there are all of my values. Okay, so I need to so I'm going to just create let temp object equal an object, and it's not going to be empty this time, right? I know I'm going to need title, and that is just going to be key, right? And so let's go ahead and we'll do temp object, move this. There, yeah, we're still inside the for loop, so we're good there. All right, so now I've got 3 objects. So there's my title. All right, next I need total employees. Which is going to be parsed data, right? And then my key, and then now I'm into, so if I just do this, right? Total employees is the entire array, and my count is over here. It's that number 2, right? So there's that. Right, so total employees, there's my count there. So next I need average salary. And so same thing here, AVG salary, and we can do this, and salary is in the 0 position. So there is my total salary. I need the average. So, right, that's going to be divided by this. Right, there's my average. So now I'm getting that big long trailing decimal, and it looks like we don't need any decimal places. So I can take this whole thing here, and I'm just going to wrap the whole thing in parseInt. So there's my salaries. I'm going to grab this. Throw that down here, and this is going to change to 1. And we'll change this key to average bonus. Right, and so there's my average bonus. So that's looking good, 77.5, 18,750. Now, if we do average total comp. Believe this will work. Nope, it didn't in here. It probably won't access it correctly. All right, so basically what I'm going to do is take this. And do this plus this. And there's our average total comp. So that is pretty much what we need. Now I'm going to take let temp object, and we're going to, instead of console.logging it, we're going to do results.push temp object. And there's our return value, right? So there's the array. There's no other console.logs in here, right? And there are the objects that show up. And so this, again, more values to deal with, and we're digging deeper into nested objects. But at the end of the day, we did the exact same thing, right? It was just more more values. We had 3 values to deal with, and everything was nested. So we had to dig in a little bit further. But this is basically doing the exact same thing as this. All right. Any questions for me on how I solved this one? Okay, so this is gonna be it for class. Like, this was the last thing we're doing. It's 8:55 p.m. Central Time. Let me go ahead and pause the recording.